Hi, I'm Ted Haftegabber, founder and producer of Live Talks Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us. Since we started over a decade ago, we have brought you hundreds of conversations with storytellers, writers, actors, musicians, humorists, chefs, and thought leaders in business and science. You can watch and hear most of these in our YouTube channel and our podcast. For details, visit livetalksla.org. And now, here's the show you've tuned in to see.
Okay, I'm not playing. Welcome. This is very, very exciting, and for us, a particularly sort of sentimental moment,
Yes.
because I wrote a story about the Bangles, and what will shock you is what year it was.
Yes.
1987.
Yep.
So we have this history from a very long time ago. It's a little shocking.
Yes.
I was at the time working for Rolling Stone, and this was a delightful, thrilling assignment for me because I was a big fan. And I came out to LA, and Susanna and I were remembering the other day about going to Hamburger Hamlet.
Yeah. On
Anybody
Sunset.
remember Hamburger Hamlet?
Yeah.
And spending time talking there, and I of course met with everyone in the band, and it was a really kind of wonderful. I have incredibly fond memories of that trip.
Oh,
Has
good.
anything changed?
No.
Basically, your life has stayed
No, it's
exactly the same.
Yeah, I still wear those crazy outfits, and no, no, it was momentous for us to have a cover story in Rolling Stone. I mean, it's like the song, the cover of the Rolling Stone. It's a big moment.
Yeah.
It was a big moment.
Well, at that time, really, and it's still meaningful, but at that time, to be on the cover was a kind of Good Housekeeping seal of approval. It was a big, big deal. And I think in the case of the usual direction of the magazine, it was something of a departure. I would say there weren't that many women who had been on the cover.
No, and it was quite, it was skewed definitely towards male artists, for sure.
Yeah.
And it was so nice to be talking with a female journalist. I remember thinking that. And we had a whole thing in there about Bengal baby years, and there was all kinds of funny stuff to go back and do a little archaeological digging on the us from then, and all the how we've changed.
Yeah,
so the perspective.
I would say, actually, professionally speaking, I'm doing exactly the same thing.
Well,
that I
I
was
think
doing in
that's
1987, which is that a bad sign?
No, I feel I was
have no
reflecting
imagination.
on the journey of my life in the arts, and I feel like I'm exactly the same person I was in '81, making flyers, putting them at the Whiskey A Go-Go at a Go-Go's concert to try to find bandmates. Like, I've always been kind of DIY indie in the way that I do everything. It's the same with the novel.
So tell me about that. And first of all, I know you're a big reader. Tell me about when the idea of writing a book kind of cropped up, and how you then steeled yourself to give it a try.
Yeah. Well, I had obviously done music, made lots of records, both with the Bangles and with Matthew Sweet, and also as a solo artist. And I have been a reader my entire life. I've always loved disappearing into a fiction, whether it's my obsession with watching movies every night and having my head in a book or listening to an audiobook. And I feel like there's stories inside of songs too. I'm always, there's something about getting out of my own head and having permission to be in a fiction that's always been something I've drawn to and almost used in a kind of therapeutic way, I would say. But I had co-written some screenplays over the years. They had been optioned, and they ultimately ended up in development hell of some sort. And that had just happened. And it had been such a good experience co-writing a screenplay for Warner Brothers that ended up in development hell on a shelf somewhere. And I was sitting around with my 2 sons and my husband Jay, who's a filmmaker, and my older son Jackson said, "Mom, why don't you write a novel?" Because I was kind of bereft at what happened over the screenplay. I was kind of in this blue mood thinking, I spent a year and a half joyfully envisioning this film and co-writing it with a friend, and now that's it. Where does it go? And so the idea of a novel where I could have more control, challenge myself to write something completely solo, which bizarrely, even though I've written a lot in my life, I always seem to collaborate.
Oh, interesting.
So this was a fully solo venture, and I began to kind of, because I'm always reading and rereading books that I love, I started to kind of cobble together a kind of idea for what the themes of the book could be. I knew that it would be fun for me to really write from a female point of view, and to be able to kind of conceive of a character who is a conduit for ways to express the experience of some experiences of my life as a woman. And I didn't know whether, I thought she should be possibly an actress or someone in the arts, for sure. But then I realized I had this opportunity, if I made her a musician, that I would be able to maybe pull back the curtain on what that experience has been like, even if it took writing it to uncover things that were sort of sublimated in me from my own experiences. So, yeah, that's kind of how it began.
Tell me what books or authors you sort of look to for inspiration as you started, and I'm assuming that you did.
Oh, definitely. Well, I reread a lot of books that were impactful to me as a child. In particular, I was interested in the book Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. I love the fierceness of that character, and I've read it over the course of my life probably 5 times. But I had stumbled upon a beautiful audiobook version that Juliet Stevenson, a wonderful narrator of audiobooks, had done. And there was something in the delivery of the sentences and the dialogue that it really sprang to life in a kind of way that I had never really experienced in all the times I've read Jane Eyre. And I was really interested in the theme of, can the ghosts of our past, threaten our chances of true love or happiness? And that was very instrumental in designing the story that This Bird Has Flown became,
Mm-hmm.
And there was the book Rebecca, too, that I revisited, Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which the protagonist is the lead character is the unnamed protagonist. She's nameless. Rebecca is the wife that Max de Winter, the man who sweeps her off her feet and marries this young assistant that he meets at a hotel, she is unnamed. So Rebecca is the name of the ghost of
the dead wife.
The dead wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was intrigued with the idea of, can the ghosts in our past, destroy our chances of happiness?
Those are obviously classic novels. Was there anything more contemporary that you kind of looked to?
Gosh, there's so many books. This is not as old of a book, but I'm really a big John Updike fan, and I have read the book Couples many, many times over. I really like the writing is very lyric and beautiful, but the stories are about very human foibles and lots of sex and misbehaving, and I love a bit of perversity. I love down and dirty behavior in characters, and I don't know why that book was very profound somehow in the writing of my book, even though you would never make that association, just for me personally.
Right.
Yeah.
So you make the decision you're going to
Yeah.
plunge into writing a novel. Tell me a little about the process and how you went about writing it. Did you sort of think through the plot? Did you describe the way you wrote it?
Well, my son Jackson, who had said, "Mom, why don't you write a novel after the screenplay experience?" He also gave me another prompt, which is, stop talking about this potential story. And he said, tomorrow when you wake up, just open your computer and you'll see a blank page and just start. And so I did exactly what he told me to do. He's a very smart kid. And I just started. I didn't know what the first sentence would be, and it's not the same one that's in the book. But I just started to, I keep describing it like a movie screen almost came down, and I just imagined a place. Like, this is not the opening of my book. It opened in Hawaii. It opened in the ocean in Hawaii. It's so randomly different. But I just ended up writing that, not one page, but 2 pages. And then I forced myself to read it aloud to my family. I even invited my mom and dad, and my mother is here tonight, to be witnesses that I had done it. I had plunged in, and I had started, and wherever it took me, I would figure it out. And then it all started to really blossom in my imagination. Music, I would go on my walks, which I do anyway in the morning, and I always listen to music. And music is like the best, safest drug in the world, I always say, because you could be in the worst mood or having some challenge in your life, and you put on a song, and it's just you're transported emotionally, but also in your imagination too. So I would put on songs, and through the course of writing the book, I actually curated a playlist, because as soon as I would play a song, like for example, Friday I'm in Love by The Cure, my characters would just start talking. And I would just be in Oxford, where some of the book is set, not to give away spoilers, and this love relationship is blossoming, and the song is perfect for that. And then they would start talking, and I would pull over, essentially, from my walk to the sidewalk and text myself what they were saying, because I learned the hard way. If I thought I had a great idea, by the time I was home from my walk, it was gone. It was just gone. So Post-it notes by the bed for waking up in the middle of the night, or trying to go to sleep, and you lay down and then you have an idea.
Right.
And that happens to you too?
Oh yeah. I mean, I used to get a lot of ideas while I was driving.
Oh, I hate that.
It was like,
I hate that.
What do you
pull
do?
over.
And then
Because
and
it
then-
doesn't work to do that
No.
because it's wired through to the car. I had
Yeah.
so much. So you have to
and
pull
also
over.
it's a little like trying to remember a dream,
It's
because
exactly.
you think, no, I'll just write it when I get home, and then you get home and think, wait, what was that?
No, I know, and it was such a good idea.
I know.
Damn.
So did you write pretty steadily? Did it
Yes.
move forward pretty?
Once I got the bug and the characters were talking to me, and I spent years, when I realized that I don't even know which came first, but I was obsessed with watching British shows, British crime shows, detective shows during the writing of a book that ultimately is set in the UK. So I had permission to just, my life was so good. I really enjoyed the writing. Even though Jay kept coming home, my husband, who's a filmmaker, and he'd say, "Why are you laughing and happy?" Nobody's happy writing, but I was. I enjoyed it.
Really?
Because it was, yeah, I felt like my whole day was crafted around watching British crime shows, taking copious notes on the way that they say things. I watched every episode of Inspector Morse, and there's so many seasons. I mean, I'm telling you, this is like 15 seasons,
And you've
spanning
seen them all.
20 years. I've seen them all, because they say such, I mean, there's just so many self-serious characters who are so full of themselves, and they say hilarious things, and I knew that if I don't want to give too much away about the book, but there are some academics. The book some of it takes place in Oxford, so there's just the hilarious things that these sort of snooty academics say to each other were just priceless to me.
Yeah.
So I was endlessly entertained by the British shows.
Did you find writing alone versus a collaboration to be exciting because you didn't have to negotiate someone else's ideas?
Yes. And I just, for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's, and I've only written one book, but I loved my characters, and I had fun with them, and I wanted to be with them. And so writing alone for hours at a time was just the best job. I didn't really, took me a long, long time to allow anybody to read what I'd written, even though I'd done a little test drive that first day with my family, more as an exercise for myself to prove that I was going to do it. Mm-hmm. But after that, I just had endless fun disappearing into this fictional world. And again, it was like, how do you turn it off? And I'm sure you, like you said, in the car, you get an idea, the best idea you've ever had in your life, and you have no way to, it's like you're possessed a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of a wonderful but overwhelming sensation. And what was it like sort of postpartum when you finished? It sounds like you really were keeping company with your characters, and then it was over.
It's kind of difficult. I must admit, I'm struggling a little bit, because it was very hard to let go to the last version of the book, and every line, that's the line, that's it. No chance to futz with it or noodle with it, and then this thing of old memories of earlier drafts, and just kind of a little bit of a psychosis took over. I mean, is that normal also? This is my first book.
Yes, well, we can turn this into a therapy session.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Susan, help me.
Yes.
I'm having trouble separating from, it's an attachment.
It is a strange thing when you are living in a world in your head, and
I know.
it's very, very consuming, and then when you get back the first set of galleys, I'm sure you had this feeling where you think, oh, first of all, it's over, and there is this feeling where you read it in cold type, and I don't know if this happened to you, but you think, oh my God, this is awful, and it's too late to really do anything about it.
You start worrying so much.
Oh, yeah.
Panicking a little bit,
Well, the first time I went through this, and I got my galleys on my first book, and I called my editor and said, can we cancel? Because I don't think we should publish this.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a little like being 9 months pregnant and going, maybe I don't want kids.
I changed my mind.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm up for this.
Yeah, it seemed like a good idea 9 months ago. But it was interesting to me that you set so much of the book in the UK. Because you grew up here, you
Yeah.
live here, you've spent so much time in
Yeah.
California. Talk about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was having studied and reread Jane Eyre, and also Rebecca's set in Great Britain too. I don't know. I keep thinking that maybe the fact that the British invasion and the Beatles had such an impact on me, the musical part of me, the part of me that wanted to form a band, kind of the female version of, I mean, I'm never supposed to say that publicly, but that's what we were secretly trying to do. The Beatles, the Bangles, I mean, there was, whoops, I just let that cat out of the bag. But that was like, I just looking back on my life, there's something about when the Beatles came to America, and I was a little girl. I don't know, I was intrigued with Great Britain, and so much great literature that I've loved over the course of my life, and films, and, I just a bit of an Anglophile, and yeah, so I also thought that Oxford itself, and I probably am repeating here, but I thought because I was my book was a little bit of a nod to Jane Eyre and Rebecca, I thought that Oxford would provide that Gothic setting. You could have a modern story, but the buildings are really old and Gothic, and that this American girl, this very much a California girl, would feel like a fish out of water and be out of her element and a little intimidated, though she really wants to fit in. So I thought that would be a good predicament for her as a character.
One thing that's interesting is to create a protagonist who inevitably people will say, well, how much of this is you and how much of it isn't? And to me, I think it makes sense that you have a character who you know so much about the world she comes from, but she seems very different from you.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear how you came to know her as a figure, and what parts of her you could invent entirely separate from yourself.
Yeah. Well, I did. I love her as a person, even though she's fictional. It was fun to write about someone who's 30 years younger than me, because wow, remember those years, that time? But I guess once I made the decision to make Jane Start, that's the name of the protagonist, who basically narrates the story.
Right.
I thought, the opening. Let's see, how do I start? I don't want to give too many things away, but I guess I felt that she wears her heart on her sleeve. She's very sensitive. She feels everything very deeply. I like that she's very just aware of everything that's going on around her. And I liked that. I found it interesting the way that this character, I don't know, she just decided to be who she was. Is that something that happens too? They just kind of like having a baby. They just are who they are. So she was who she was, and she would just start as I was typing. I mean, the way that she experiences every situation that she's in, she's a very sensitive person, and so she's like very aware of everything going on around her, good, bad, and otherwise. And so she's narrating all of these experiences. I'm probably not really quite answering your question. She's not me. She's different from me, but I really love her. I want to be like she feels like a really good friend. Like she's not me, but when it came time to sort of connect with my own experience, if I were to plant myself in situations that she was in. She is a musician, so we see her not only throughout the book experiencing this new love in Oxford, but also just experiencing what music feels like to perform in different in different ways. Because this isn't giving too much away, the book opens on her coming down an elevator, tarted up to play a bachelor party in Vegas, something that she's not feeling very good about. This is signaling like 10 years post having a singular hit and kind of cementing her, or at least her feeling about herself, but also the world thinks of her this way as a one-hit wonder. That's kind of like, and she's on the heels of a breakup. I'm not giving too much away. She's been thrown over for another, the boyfriend has cheated on her, and you know, she's really in kind of a horrible place when we find her coming down this elevator in Vegas to do the bachelor party. And from there, she just, I don't know how, I don't want to give too much away, but.
Yeah. Well, did you ever play a bachelor party?
I have played what we call privates in the business, and it's something that you don't hear about, you know, when a very famous rock star will play like a billionaire's island.
Right.
You know,
right.
there's a whole subset in the music business of private gigs. You just don't hear about them. So no, I have never been like Jane Starr. I've not had to play a bachelor party, but I have played parties, and I have played parties in Vegas. And I have been in an elevator in a miniskirt with a rolly bag, with whatever things that I need. And I've had a feeling similar to what my protagonist feels when she's going down the elevator to do her private gig.
Well, I think that is one of the pleasures of the book, are those moments when, you know, there's a world that you, having lived, can share with us and, you know, give us a glimpse. And some of it is the less savory parts of being, I mean, just the word private alone kind of tells you a lot.
Yes.
But I think that it brings a kind of intimacy to the story that's really pleasurable.
Yeah. I mean, it was really fun to write because I had enough access to feelings like that I certainly could use them and give them to Jane to grapple with.
Yeah. So, on balance, is it more fun to write a book or make an album?
I don't know. I think it's more fun to write a book.
Really?
As much as I love making albums. There's something about the solo act of it, and I don't know. I don't know why. I loved the experience so much, even though it was at times difficult to work through the various struggles and the storytelling. And I don't know why. Right now, I would definitely say it's more fun to write a novel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there a point in the book that, what would you say was the most challenging part of the book? I mean, obviously getting started in and of itself is often the hardest thing, but was there a point where you were really struggling or grappling with the complexity of the storytelling? Or
Yeah. I mean, I think, and it went through the course of years, things changed. There's this whole extra section of the book that I want to save for something else, because some friends had invited me to go on a yacht in the Mediterranean, and I brought one of my kids with me, and suddenly I'm writing a whole, you know, third act that's set in the Mediterranean on a yacht. And I had one friend who was really struggling, and she's a big reader and a writer herself. And during the first person I ever allowed to know about my book was this childhood friend of mine, and I would invite her over. She would say, "Can I come over? Will you just read to me?" And I said, "Yes, I need to read my book out loud. It's the important part of the exercise of writing." I just discovered partly reading to my friend. So I read this crazy hours and hours of it. Like it went on for, I can't even calculate how many hours it took, including this whole yacht section. And I said, well, you got to give me some feedback. She's like, I don't think the yacht section fits with the rest of the book, which is great. It was the greatest thing that I got out of her. But I have this whole cool section of a book that I want to use for something. Next book.
And that actually is a question in itself. Do you anticipate writing another book?
Desperate to write another book.
Well,
I've got the yacht section. Yeah, the yacht section has to be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the course of, it's interesting that you mentioned reading as part of the editing. Were you a good editor of your own work? Did you, besides the process of reading, I'd love to hear how you worked on the writing. And
yeah, so I wrote for several years without, I think my friend Mary came over and I don't remember where in the journey I read the really, really long with the yacht section to her, but I was mostly alone in it and just kind of entertaining myself, really. It was very entertaining actually writing the book. And then I let my son Jackson read it, and I don't know how he dealt with the sexy parts, but somehow he was able to. And then I let my husband, who's a very good storyteller, read it. And I started to get notes from people that were very, very useful. And that was good. But there was a very long period before my really dear friend Margaret Stoll, who's a YA, a young adult, mostly writer, insisted, please let me read it. And she basically tore it from my grasp. And then she read it very quickly and said, you need to get this to an agent ASAP. And I was like, but it'll never be good enough. She's like, stop. This is exactly where it should be. And she'd written a lot of books, so I trusted her. And I said, well, who is that? And she said, well, I think my agent, Sarah Burns, who's in New York, would love it. So it went from there. On my 60th birthday, it was pissing down rain. I was due to have lunch with Belinda Carlisle in the neighborhood. And my son Jackson, the same son that gave me the prompt to start, said, Mom, I'll drive it to FedEx for you. That was the best birthday gift ever. So I was able to make my lunch with Belinda, knowing Jackson was driving my manuscript, big fat manuscript, to FedEx.
So you're not familiar with email?
Okay, here's the thing. I had this fear of emailing a draft that wasn't ready.
No, it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
So I would not email it at that point. I was too neurotic to email it.
It's funny because most publishers will not accept hard copies.
Really?
Oh, God,
Well, I had an in with my friend Margaret who gave me and so I FedExed it to Sarah. She got it on a Saturday. I went to a friend's house on a Sunday to do like a movie night thing at their house, and I tried to tune out, picturing her sitting there reading it and going, this is garbage, or whatever, And by about 8 or 6 o'clock maybe, or 7 o'clock on that Sunday night, I thought, maybe I should check my email. So I looked at my email, and there was the email from Sarah, and she was like, I love this. Can we meet tomorrow? I'm in LA. And I was like, shit, I have to record. I had a recording session the next 2 days. She's like, I can stay an extra day. I was like, whoa, this is promising. So it turned out that I wasn't able to see her in LA, but then we got on the phone, we discussed it, we made sure that she was happy with that it was an adult novel, it was not a YA, she got the manuscript. And then I flew to New York with Jay, my husband, and I was going to meet my agent. And I wore a little jacket, and I walked in the freezing cold in January to her office, And I have to admit, in front of this room full of people, that I shed a little tear because I was picturing like New York of the 1950s. And I was picturing going to the literary agent's office on the Upper East Side, which it was. And then I went in there and it was like so bookish and charming. There were books everywhere. And Sarah's at the Gernert Company, and David Gernert, who's the name that's on the agency, said, "Oh, I love your song Hero Takes a Fall," which was a Bangles song. So I felt immediately at home. I met the very small group of agents there, and it was just, and then Sarah took me to like the Watering Hole restaurant where all the writers and their agents schmooze, and so it was just like a 3-hour lunch. It was so perfect. It was so perfect.
That's great. I mean, were you as excited when your first record came out?
No. No. Nothing compares to this. No, I was.
Really?
I was, but I wasn't alone. There's something about the solo adventure of this. And also just wanting to do it my whole life and not doing it and then doing it. Like, I don't know. I don't know why it's so meaningful, but it truly is.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about the role that music plays in your life now.
Well, I always say it's the beginning, middle, and end of every day. It's the best drug in the world. It's safe. You can take it over and over again. You can listen to the same song that if you need to listen to that song over and over again, and you won't, OD on it. It's just so, I don't know. I lost track of your question.
So did I.
Yeah, okay, good. I don't feel so bad.
No, I think, I guess what I'm curious about is it's like you have a new lover, which is the writing game.
It is.
So where does music fit with that?
Well, music is just an inspiration, I guess. So the music will always inspire me.
So you said you had a recording session. Are you working on a new album?
Well, that was an album called Bright Lights at the time. I was working on that one. But I just made an album with Peter Asher from Peter and Gordon, but also first president of Apple Records and worked with the Beatles. And for me, in particular, his Linda Ronstadt albums, Heart Like a Wheel and Prisoner in Disguise, those two albums, and the James Taylor albums he did, and he worked with Bonnie Raitt. He was just like a dream. This was another thing that just somehow landed in my life unexpectedly, that Peter Asher just, in the beginning of 2021, deep pandemic blues, we're all home, no one can go anywhere. I mean, I could write at home at least. That was good. But I get a call that he wants to meet with me and talk about making an album. And could we figure out a way to do it during COVID, which we did.
How'd you do that?
Well, we kind of bubbled up with the band that played on the Linda Ronstadt records, Russ Kunkel on drums, Leland Sklar on bass, Danny Korchmar and Waddy Wachtel on guitars, like the most incredible players whose music I listened to as a child and learned to singing along to those Linda albums. We just bubbled up. We took a lot of tests before the studio. We were like in this bubble for 4 or 5 days tracking. And then from there, it was just me and Peter and another engineer. So we were all careful, and we skated through during COVID, being able to record.
Because I think singing is one of the ways
Spreaders.
that COVID was most transmitted.
But with the singing in the studio, you're usually in a ISO booth, so you're sort of alone.
Right.
Yeah,
that
so
makes sense.
that wasn't that part wasn't the challenge.
Yeah. So when is that coming out?
That actually just came out right around when the book came out. I think I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but people said, well, you might as well put them both out at the same time. It's making it so that I'm very overwhelmed and like just doing a lot of, serving both projects has been just on a press level, and it's been a lot.
And this is probably a bit of a sort of long shot question, but do you feel that this experience writing has had any impact on you as a musician? I mean, is there any way that that sort of translated over?
Well, because music played such a huge part in inspiring things in the book, and like I said, there's a lot of chapter headings that are based on song titles, and because I cobbled together over the course of writing it a playlist that just went with the story in my mind. It was like the score for the book. So your question was were they related with the record, or
more that I'm just curious if
music played a part?
More that did this experience of writing your book and seeing yourself as a writer, kind of realizing that dream, has it had any impact on you as a musician? So did it move in that direction rather than the music inspiring you as a writer?
I think that the challenge now is to try songwriting again. And I have been away from songwriting, and I've always collaborated when I write songs. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get back into it. But I'm actually very fearful about songwriting. Now the experience of writing the novel was quite different, because songs there's so much meter and rhyme scheme. They're not as, to get into that flow. It's very different. It's just very different for me. Yeah.
I mean, your feeling is maybe it'll be really hard to go
back
to the constraints of songwriting.
Yeah. I feel a little worried now that I've had this luxurious freedom to just I want to go here, I want to go, oh, they're going to say this, ooh, they're going to do that. You're just going. It's just so free, and I feel like, oh, okay, I have to figure out, I believe that in every song there is a story. There is a story. There's a story that elicits a feeling that maybe we've had, maybe we haven't, but typically songs tell those stories, whether it's a heartbreak story or a joy story, a celebration story. Those stories live inside of songs too, but they just have to be, it's almost like Tetris or something. You have to, you have to fit, there's rhyme schemes and meter, and it's just a little more craft oriented.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, you have constraints that are so specific.
Yeah.
And it's probably, it's like building a house. I mean, it has to function in a certain way, whereas writing, there is this tremendous freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's always going to work the way, but the sensation, you aren't except, I suppose, using punctuation and common spelling, and but there are, besides that,
it's almost more like being a poet or something,
right? But being somebody writing like sonnets or haiku or something that's incredibly structured rather than.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's intimidating me. But I think I can do it.
Yeah.
I think I should try.
I think so.
I know that I'm going to try.
I'm suddenly in a panic because I think maybe I have to sort of round this out, maybe.
Or ask, or
as
see
they've installed a clock for that very purpose. But it's maddening because this is so much fun. I could keep going.
Do we have
to?
Well, we could ask. We could see.
Well, I think what we are making time for is questions.
Yes.
So some Q&A, and then we have a very exciting edition of you and Fred making some music, and I will hold my ukulele. I won't play it, which you'll be glad of, but it'll make me feel part of the musical experience.
At Live Talks Los Angeles, just a reminder, questions typically start with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They are generally short. And this thing about two-part questions, we don't do that. Our first question.
Susie, I can't believe it's been almost 50 years since I saw you. I was your Paul
Where are
Revere
you?
junior high school English teacher.
What?
And I want the audience to know you were outstanding, you were creative, you were motivated, and you were kind. Everybody loved you the way they do tonight. Thank you. I'm so proud of you. And keep on writing.
This is like an episode of This
Oh
Is
my
Your
gosh.
Life.
I'm so moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Hi, Susanna. How are you?
Hello.
So I spent
Good.
all weekend lost in the book. It is so great. I promise not to give anything away, but I have a question about Pippa.
Oh, yes.
Pippa is Jane's best friend. There's like a lot of love there. And I was reading the book and I was wondering, did you have a Pippa in your life? Somebody that you turned to, maybe it was one person, maybe two people that you had that support with when you were a musician that you could, go and talk to in that sense?
Well, I don't have. I wish I have. I wish I had a Pippa in my life because she's not exactly like. I can't. There's not a direct parallel in my life quite, but she's like the dream friend. She also happens to be Jane's manager, so she has to sort of put on the manager hat sometimes. But really, I always, early on when I was, like people would ask me what the book's about, I'd say it's a love story between a man and a woman, but it's also a love story between two friends. Two friends. And that's so true for Jane and Pippa. They really love each other and support each other in all the best ways, even if they sometimes disagree on things. I loved Pippa's heart. I love Pippa's heart. I love her Britishness and sort of, I don't know if I'm answering your question quite right, but I just loved their relationship in the book, and I'm glad that that's something that struck you. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Pippa is an unsung hero.
I love the Bangles, of course, and I'd like to ask you about your video going down to Liverpool that you had Leonard Nimoy and what was he doing there? Mr. Spock, and what did that have to do? That's a great video.
Well, thank you for the question. And my mother is here today, Tamar Simon Hoffs. Well, my childhood, I actually grew up in the Nimoy household. Because I don't know, I guess there are a lot of actors in LA that somehow my parents became friends with actors and creative people. Having met at the preschool when they came to pick me and my brothers up, the other parents were people like Leonard and Sandy Nimoy and Ben Gazzara and Janice Rule. So our childhood in LA was very interesting, but maybe I'm not answering your question. Oh, the reason that, so cut to, I'm not a little girl and it's not the 60s anymore, it's now the 1980s. I'm in a band, I'm on, which has been signed to Columbia Records, and we're set to release Going Down to Liverpool, an amazing song that we covered by a songwriter named Kimberly Rue from Great Britain, and it was a very British song. And we were setting out to make a video, and somehow I got the idea that I should call Leonard and see if he would make a cameo in the Bangles. So I worked up the courage to call him, and he said, I can't do the accent. Who can do a good Leonard Nimoy accent? Absolutely, Susie, I would do that. He called me Susie, because that's how I was known back then. He just stepped up. He was that cool of a guy.
That's amazing.
He stepped up.
He seems like he would have been
So
kind
cool.
of amazing.
Amazing. We were just talking about the Nimoys would always throw a Hanukkah party And they would have all kinds of amazing people there. And I have these memories of standing in the buffet line between Vincent Price and who was the other guy? Adam West. Adam West was there. It was Adam West. It was, and it was so fun.
Great.
Yeah, Batman.
Good evening, Susanna, and congrats on the 40th anniversary with the Bangles.
Oh, is
I
it?
will. Yeah, okay.
Am
I'd
I
like to
that
know
old? I guess so.
how many times you've collaborated with your husband, and on what projects, like Austin Powers or any of the Bangles music videos.
Yeah, actually, the Bangles wrote a song for the second Austin Powers movie. And so wait, I'm confused by the question. Could you repeat it? Sorry.
Here's an easy one. Have you been inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as of yet?
No. Period.
There
no,
you go.
No, not yet. Hopefully, maybe down the line. We'll see.
So I love the version of Manic Monday you did for the Prince tribute, and just want to get a little bit of your thinking about how that arrangement came to pass. So touching.
Yes. Well, I was a friend of mine, David Wild, who produces those Grammy events, special salutes to certain artists. He contacted me and had told me that Chris Martin had picked Manic Monday as the song that he wanted to perform at the Grammy salute to Prince. And David Wild put me together with Chris, and I had this idea of doing a very stripped down version of it because he plays piano, and just the idea of us initially sitting just side by side at the piano and doing kind of a very intimate duet and just a stripped down version, very different from what the Bangles had done. And so that's kind of what we ended up doing, and it was really quite special because it was a moment in the show where they were kind of going through the course of Prince's life, and various wonderful, amazing artists were doing, renditions, their own renditions of the songs. And then Misty Copeland, the ballerina, came out and spoke about how Prince was so generous to give songs that he had written to female artists, and she had gone on tour with him and had done dancing in the show, yeah. And that was the setup for Chris and me to come out and do this very heartfelt duet on like a very quiet version of Manic Monday that took on a whole nother meaning with it being timed at this part of the show where it was like, this is the story of Prince's life, and now we're entering the part where he's died, and it was very emotional. It was hard to it was very scary for me because I hadn't played in a big venue. It was at the convention center, and it was so quiet. It was just the piano and Chris and me, and it was such a giant venue. It was very scary, but we got through it, and I think that the performance went off very nicely, actually.
Hi, Susanna. I'm over here.
Okay,
Sorry. I don't know.
hi.
I wanted to stand, but I'm very tall. But my first concert ever was the Bangles, and I saw you in Paris, California with my best friend. And I just had to shout that out. And
Thank
also,
you.
The All Nighter is my favorite movie.
Oh, my
very
mother
mu-
is here. She directed it.
Yeah, she's the best.
Where's
I
Tammy?
love that movie. But I wanted to ask you,
Tammy, stand up for
where
a
is
second.
she?
She's right here.
She's a rock star.
I know.
Very rock star family. I just had to say all that because you're the best and you mean so much to me. But I wanted to ask, because the character is a musician, do you plan on writing music for her?
Well, that would be a goal. I mean, that's a dream. I have this feeling like made the best song win. Universal bought the. Theoretically, there's going to be a movie. I've written the screenplay for Universal, and I have wonderful movie producers. So a song will really be necessary if the film adaptation comes to pass. So I would like to take a stab at writing this. There's 2 key songs in the book that are mentioned in the book. Yeah.
Hi, Susanna. I'm back here. I understand that A Bird Has Flown has already been optioned as a potential film, and you'll be writing the screenplay.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's be real. I'm sure you've got actors and actresses in mind for certain characters. So, without telling who would be your dream cast, can you just name some actors that you would love to see the script in front of? Thanks.
I hear Brian Cox is available.
Who should he play, though? No, I had, it's a question that I don't quite have an answer to, but I could tell you this. During the years that I spent writing the book, over time I started to cobble together like a mood board, you might call it, where I would, if I needed to describe a character's face, I'd kind of just surf around the interwebs and see, and typically it'd be actors' faces that would, because I was in the back of my mind, because the whole thing kind of felt like I was inside the movie version in my head, my imagination. And I made a little mood board, and I had photos for everybody in the cast. But I don't want to reveal those, because they're kind of private. But they did allow me to just, sometimes I would just look at the faces, and I just think, I like this face. It's such a nice face.
Yeah. And she's how old?
She's
forgotten.
33.
Oh. Well, that gives you a lot of interesting possibilities.
And the love interest is around 40.
40, yeah. Oh, it's so much fun to play pretend casting.
I know.
But
I have lots of ideas.
Maybe you want to wait on that.